Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Following Tuesday's primary, the races for November are now set. For the United States Senate, Rick Scott will be up against Democrat Debbie Murkisel-Powell. In Congressional District 27, there was a close race to see who would take on Republican Maria Elvira Salazar. Democrat and school board member Lucia Baez-Geller beat out former mayor of Key Biscayne, Mike Davey. Baez-Geller will now face Salazar this fall locally. Two of Ron DeSantis' appointees to the Broward School Board, Tori Alston and Daniel Foganelli, lost their seats. And for reasons that mystify me, the scandal-plagued Broward Sheriff Gregory Toney won his primary, guaranteeing his re-election in November. In Miami-Dade, Mayor Daniela Levine Cava handily won re-election, and we now know that Democrat James Reyes will face Republican Rosie Cordero-Stutz in the first Miami-Dade sheriff's race in almost 60 years. But there is another race that may very well be the most important of them all, the race to see who will oversee elections in Miami-Dade County going forward. For the first time in decades, the Supervisor of Elections in Miami-Dade will be an elected position. And not just elected, but also a partisan one. Democrat J.C. Planas will face Republican Alina Garcia in November. Making sure our elections run fairly should not be a partisan affair. And since the debacle of the 2000 election, elections in Miami-Dade have run smoothly and without any serious problems because the department has been overseen by professionals and not politicians. But that's about to change. So voters have to pay attention to this race and understand who the candidates are. And to get us started, we are joined this morning by the Democrat in the race, J.C. Planas. J.C., welcome.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
So I sort of laid out why I think this is a critical and important race. I'm sure you probably agree, and I think it's one of those races that has the tendency to fly under the radar as everyone focuses on the mayor, the sheriff, the presidency, but Supervisor of Elections critical.
It is definitely not the flashiest race, but the truth is that protecting our democracy is extremely important, and as someone who's been an election lawyer for 15 years, a professor of election law for 9 years, I know full well how important this position is.
And in case people are wondering why it's important, I want to go through and make people understand, you know, it's not that I think that if the wrong person got in there that they would go in and change votes or manipulate votes. No. The important thing is it's the mechanics of elections. So deciding where precincts will be located, deciding how many machines are allocated to a specific precinct or polling site. If you take away precinct sites, for instance, or precincts or voting machines in a Democratic district and therefore create long lines, you could discourage voting in certain districts. So that's why this is critical. Am I right?
Yes, and I'll give you a prime example. In 2012, we had long lines at early voting, long lines on Election Day, and simply by just reconfiguring the inside of the early voting sites, we were able to eliminate those lines. That's how critical this is. That's a lot of the discretion that the supervisor has. The other issue is that the state sets the maximum amount of hours for early voting, but supervisors at their discretion can actually shorten those hours. We need to make sure that we have the maximum hours at early voting at all times. Miami-Dade deserves that.
So that was going to be one of my questions. So that's one of your pledges. You would guarantee that Miami-Dade elections would take advantage of the maximum number of hours for early voting,
absolutely,
for day of voting.
Absolutely. And then of course there's lobbying the state for law changes. Right now, early voting is only allowed in government buildings, libraries, municipal halls. For the presidential election, they get one audible. They get one facility that's outside of those. We need to lobby for more. There's no reason why the state should not be allocating resources to have early voting, for instance, in empty retail space or banquet halls, facilities that have a lot of parking, which is essential for early voting. They are easy to get to, and also happen to be in suburban areas where voters are. This is just a convenience to voters. We should not be inconveniencing voters by any stretch of the imagination. We need to take this out to where voters are.
So I want to talk about turnout in a minute, but I want to continue the conversation about, you heard me say at the top of the show about how I don't think this should be a partisan affair. I don't think that we should have partisan election supervisors. No. I think that just creates the appearance of even problems. But obviously, that's the system that you're running in. You actually had been a Republican for a number of years. You then became an independent and ultimately a Democrat. Why did you switch from the Republican Party?
Frankly, it's lack of respect for democracy. You know, like Adam Kinzinger said at the Democratic Convention, here's a conservative Republican speaking at the Democratic Convention, and he says a line that has stuck with me: democracy knows no party. And that's the philosophy that I'm going to take to this. The truth is that this should be a nonpartisan office. Ironically, I'm one of the few people running for office that never believed this should have been an elected office. I voted against Amendment 10 back in 2018. I asked people to vote against it. This should be an office of professionals. Miami-Dade actually has one of the best supervisors of elections in the state. She didn't want to be a politician. I'm coming in, yes, I'm running for the office, but I'm here to be a professional doing a professional job to make sure everybody's vote counts. In fact, I'm going to protect the votes of those Republicans that are not going to vote for me even harder than I'm going to protect the other votes, because that's how we protect our democracy.
You know, I want to turn, as I said, I want to turn to turnout. One of the things that could take place is, you know, Christina White, the election supervisor that you referenced, has done an amazing job in terms of running elections. Yeah. But she hasn't always been the most out front public face encouraging people to vote. What role do you think? We had a very low turnout. There's lots of reasons why the turnout was low. It wasn't just in Miami-Dade. There was low turnout across the state. I think we were around, what, 17%?
We got to 19%. I was texting with the Hillsborough Supervisor of Elections during the day on Tuesday. They were roughly the same. Orange County had less. Lake County had a little bit more. Lake County got to about 21, 22%.
So what do you think the election supervisor could do to try to get more voting taking place, encourage more voting?
First of all, I think we all have to act together. There's an association. It's a very tight-knit association. I think we have to act together. Believe it or not, I think there are two things that contributed to this. Number one is the name. People hear the word primary. Well, guess what? NPA voters or independent voters, for some reason, don't think they can vote in this, even though we have the mayor, the judges, all these important races that they can vote to. In fact, races that probably have even more in-depth impact on our daily lives than the president ever will. There are fewer Republican voters in this county than there are nonpartisan voters, yet Republicans turned out more than nonpartisan voters because partisans hear the word primary and they turn out. I think we could change the name of the election, call it the county-wide municipal election and partisan primary, maybe that. I think the cancellation of the vote-by-mail ballots, the automatic receipt of vote-by-mail ballots, was very detrimental, because not only obviously do they come in, but some people, they see the ballot in their mailbox and maybe they won't fill it out, but it's their reminder that they have to go and vote.
So I just want to hold you there, because I want to make sure people understand what you're talking about. There used to be a system here in Florida where essentially, you know, if you were a regular voter and turned out, you would get your absentee ballot would almost automatically, if you had requested
vote by mail.
Vote by mail. Sorry,
absentee. In
I
10 years.
know, I'm old. But the vote by mail, if you had been voted by mail in the past, you sort of, it was automatic that you would sort of get it. Yeah. The legislature, for partisan reasons, because Democrats tend to favor
to depress turnout.
So Democrats tend to vote by mail. And so the legislature passed laws to reform what they said was a perfect system. Yeah. And what they essentially did was say every year you have to reapply to get a vote-by-mail ballot. So if you were used to getting it automatically and you didn't apply for one, you suddenly didn't get it this time around.
Let me give you the perfect example. My mother-in-law has a master's degree. My mother-in-law worked at the Miami-Dade County Attorney's Office for almost 50 years. With her education, with her experience, I had to help her fill out the application online because it's that cumbersome. And this wasn't an application designed by the local supervisors. This was Tallahassee. So if my mother-in-law with a master's degree is having a hard time filling out her new request for vote by mail? How do you think the average resident and citizen is having? This is unconscionable, completely.
All right. Your opponent is Alina Garcia, who is a state representative. You're a former state representative as well. Yes. She's currently in the state legislature. She's not running for re-election. She's running for this position instead. I've reached out to her. She has not responded. Would you be willing to do a debate with her here on the show?
Absolutely love to. I think this is what the voters deserve. Voters deserve for candidates to come before them and talk about their issues, talk about what they want to do, talk about their experience and their background in this field. I'm always willing. I mean, I love talking about election law and how elections are run.
So you mentioned earlier that you've been an election lawyer for a number of years. This is a specialty for you. Why did you go into this as a specialty?
Well, they put four candidates against me in 2006. I kicked two of them off the ballot. So when I'm termed out in 2010, I end up knowing more about election law than most lawyers, and I fell in. But I've been in love with the electoral process since I was 8 years old. We lived in Jacksonville. The mayor of Jacksonville was running for governor. My parents took my brother and I all over the state campaigning. And when he loses in the primary, they then took us all around the state campaigning for a then little-known state senator from Miami Lakes named Bob Graham. And this has been instilled in me since I was a kid. I've never missed an election since I was 18. I absolutely love the electoral process. The groups that I speak to can see my enthusiasm for elections and democracy. And that's part of the reason, even though I've only been a Democrat for 4 years, I was able to win the Democratic primary so handily.
And let me just sort of the bow ties. That's a choice. You're making a conscious choice with the bow ties.
When I was in the legislature, it was half and half. I love them, and I think like after 2012, it's been exclusively bow ties. That's what I love. I mean, listen, what we need for this job is a giant elections nerd who's not going to care about parties, but who's going to care about getting it right, and I'm your nerd.
All right. J.C. Planas, thank you very much for coming in. And again, I hope Alina Garcia will come in and sit down across from me, and then the two of you can debate it out. So I'd like to, hopefully we can get that done. All right. When we come back, we will take a look at some of the other races I mentioned at the top of the show. We'll be joined by Politico's Kimberly Leonard. Stay with us.